The term tax lien, it's been a buzzword with investors for a long time. And the reason why tax liens have always been appealing is because it's a safe investment that brings in a great rate of return. It's a kind of return that it outdoes most of your your standard investments. Investors come to buy these liens, and obviously they have to be appealing to investors. They have to offer tremendous upside, or nobody would come to invest in them. So the way that states have this set up are any states that use a tax lien system pay out a set interest rate return to investors that buy liens there, and that interest rate return ranges from about 10 to 24%, roughly. Basically what's happening is you're paying money to the county, and the county is using those funds to pay for a number of services that are being offered. Education is a huge one. Sometimes that can take up most of the money in counties, but you also have police and fire departments. You have a huge list of things that the county provides that are done through property taxes. So if somebody doesn't pay their property taxes, it obviously creates a problem. They need a good way of enforcing that. There are 3 property tax enforcement systems that are in use. There's a tax lien system, what we call a tax deed system, and a redemption deed system. To really understand how tax sales work in general, there are a couple of fundamental things that you need to understand. The property tax enforcement methods are all based on state laws, and every state's got its own set of laws. So, you literally have 50 different sets of laws controlling, how property taxes are enforced. First off, what is a lien? It's a type of claim. They can place it against property, and it's usually because you owe some kind of delinquent amount. You see, one of the attributes of a lien is that it prevents the transfer of ownership. Tax liens are what are called the first position lien, meaning that they take priority or precedence over anything else. They're property taxes, and the government wants to make sure that they get theirs first. And the only way to do that is to make it a first priority lien. You cannot sell the property until the lien is removed from the property. That's a big factor. Keep in mind always that the county's real objective here is just to collect what's owed in delinquent taxes. So the amount of the lien will be for what's owed, plus whatever penalties and fees there are. Essentially, you go to the auction, you can buy one of these liens. It'll be set for that amount that was owed, so maybe you buy it for $1,000, and you buy it at, let's say you get it at the maximum interest rate return, 18%. And it has a 2-year redemption period, okay? At that time, 2 things happen on that day. The first is the lien begins accruing interest immediately, okay? From the time that it's purchased, it is accruing interest, and if you're earning 18% annually, that means it's accruing at a rate of 1.5% per month. So every month, it's adding on another 1.5%. The second thing is that redemption period begins. And so from the date of that sale, the redemption period would be 2 years from that, so basically begins to wind down. Now, during that time period, the property owner has the choice to either pay or not pay their property taxes. The vast majority of the time, what do people do? They pay it off. They just pay their property taxes a little bit late, not really a big deal. But sometimes not, and the county has to have a way of pursuing that. So once you bought that lien, there's really only 2 things that can happen, okay? And they're both based on what the property owner does. Either they pay the county or they don't pay the county. If they pay the county, the lien is removed and a check is mailed out to you for your initial investment plus the interest rate, that's been earned up to that point. So if you had it for 6 months and it was at that 18%, you would basically earn half of that, 9%. So you get the $1,000 plus 9%, which would be $90. So you get a check in the mail for $1,090. If you had that for 2 years, then it would be 36% total, which would be $1,360. So that amount is basically mailed out to you. And the other side of that is if they don't pay. And if they don't pay, well, that's where you can use the lien to foreclose on the property, or at least to initiate that foreclosure process, which in that process, it will either be foreclosed on or it will be paid off. It's one or the other. That's what essentially forces something to happen. If you buy a tax lien for $1,000, that $1,000, I mean, the investment is essentially all but guaranteed. Okay, and we say all but guaranteed because if it doesn't redeem, then you still have to go through the foreclosure process and that. But at some point there, it will redeem. But essentially, yeah, there is really no scenario where you don't get your money back.
I mean, really the only case would be is if you're purchasing tax liens on junk property, and that's something we talk about with our members on our weekly webinar almost every single week, is that as long as you're not investing in tax and certificates on properties that don't have value and don't have use, then your investment is protected. So as long as you do the research, and we talk about this in some of our trainings about the additional tax liens, but as long as you've done your research, you're going to have the most solid investment that's really available out there based off of that research. So if you were to purchase a $1,000 tax certificate on a $1,000 piece of land or a building lot that has no value or no use, then that would essentially, you could lose your money because you're buying a tax lien on a property that doesn't have value. But if you're buying a $1,000 tax lien on a $50,000 home or a $40,000 building lot or something like that, well, then that property has value. So either you're going to pay back your interest rate return, or you're going to acquire the property. The only reason, the reason why a property owner might not pay back one of those type of properties if it is a junk property. If it's some type of junk property, then essentially the owner doesn't want to hold on to it anymore. So as long as you've done your research and you know the property's value, you know the property has use, then your investment is protected because you're either going to make back the interest or you're going to acquire the property. And if you do acquire the property, it's hitting a home run because you've purchased it or you've acquired it for 5, 10, 15, 20% of its market value.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the question you're kind of asking yourself when you're looking at the potential, investments is for the amount of the lien. So, if it's $1,000, for my $1,000 here, what is securing that? What's the, does the property have use, and what is the value? And that's where you determine. And most of the time, you're going to see that number is offset quite a bit, like a $1,000 tax lien versus a $60,000 or $100,000 property. Which obviously, your $1,000 is very secure. There's not going to be any situation there where you're not going to, you're not going to come out of it way ahead. So, and yeah, like you said with the bad properties, the biggest problem with junk land is that you could end up owning it. That's kind of like what your option is if nobody pays off the delinquent taxes, then you foreclose on the property. But if it's a junk property and doesn't have any value, then what's the point of foreclosing on it? If you can't sell it. So that's really the only risk that I would say there.
When you're investing in tax lien certificates, you're either going to make your money plus your interest rate return, or you're going to have the opportunity to acquire the property. It's really it's one of the best investment strategies that I've ever seen as far as guaranteeing an interest rate return. You're not hoping to earn 5%. You're not hoping to earn 10%, whatever that interest rate is. That interest rate is pretty much guaranteed. You're earning that on a monthly basis, and once the property owner pays the county, you're going to get cut a check. If they don't pay the county, then essentially you're going to go through the foreclosure proceedings to acquire the property.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking for a legitimate investment, it doesn't get any more legitimate than this because you are buying it. This is state law, essentially. It's based on state law. It's the county that's issuing things. It's not the kind of thing that, that you're going to get ripped off on. That's just not how it works. Like Steve said, it's if you buy that lien, it is, you're essentially guaranteed to either that interest rate return or the, or the property, essentially.
And nationwide, if we take all the tax liens that are sold in every state, about 95% of them will redeem. So, 95% of the time, you're going to make back your money, your interest rate return. Now, there's things you can do within tax investing to increase that percentage.
With liens, if you buy enough liens, you're going to acquire property. It'll happen. The primary reason that you invest into tax liens is not necessarily to acquire property, it's to earn the high interest rate return. It's because they're such a secure investment, and they are so secure because that lien is secured by the entire property. Okay, so if you buy, pay $1,000 for a lien, it's secured by a $100,000 property. And that's where the security lies. It's because it's still a form of real estate investing. It still uses real estate as the medium, which secures the investment. If property is your goal from the beginning, then we would point you towards tax deeds, which is the second system that we have listed here. The tax deed system is used in a lot of states, roughly about a third of them, and the tax deed system is a little bit different. Rather than the county creating a lien against the property every year, what the county does is they just begin a redemption period. So basically, state laws will set a redemption period. It might be 4 years, it might be 5 years. However, they'll wait out that time period. And at the end of that time period, the primary difference is the county has the power to foreclose on it. So, at the end of that time period, if they haven't paid their delinquent taxes, then the county will go through the process of sending out the foreclosure notices, and they will then foreclose on the property. Now, again, they don't want property. That's not what they want at all. They simply want the delinquent taxes that are owed. They'll foreclose on the property to get that if they need to. So the opening bid amount that they will have on these tax deeds is the total amount that's owed for delinquent taxes. So if there was a 4-year redemption period, it would be 4 years worth of delinquent taxes plus penalties and fees.
When it comes to tax deed investing, investors will invest to either earn some type of residual income, and if you're looking to earn residual income, then you could do that by renting it out, you could do that by lease option, you could do that by seller financing, where you're essentially making that property a cash flow property that's giving you residual income on a monthly basis. And so with each one of these properties, depending on your strategy, you could either turn around and flip it and make a lump sum cash, or you could rent that property out and essentially have the property pay for itself within 1 year or 2 years, or depending on how much you spend in the rental amount. But essentially, if in each one of these properties within a year and a half, through their rental income, the property would pay for itself. So not only are you earning a monthly income, but you're also increasing your net worth as that property goes up in value.
Think about this. In your local area, what does a home rent out for? Okay, and what you'll find is that homes across the country, they rent out for right around $800 to $1,000 at least, and beyond that, it can get higher, it can get more expensive. But rent is something that goes up on a regular basis. And now, compared to that amount and what rent is, how much would it cost to buy one of those properties in your local area? Where we're located at, if you wanted to create $1,000 a month in rent, you would probably have to spend $200,000 to $250,000 in order to get a home that you could do that with. Okay. Now, the real trick here is that these properties, they don't have the same high value, but they do have the same rent amount. You pay a fairly small amount for this property, and suddenly it becomes a cash cow. It becomes, it's making money for you every single month. And not only is it making money from the rent, but it's also going up in value. So you're making money both ways.
Let's say you live in California, where a 2-bedroom, 1-bath home is $500,000 or $600,000. For you to try to generate rental income within your own area, it's going to be a tough process. But for you to take that money, invest into another state and you can hire, because of the income or the value that's there as far as the rental income, you're able to hire a property management company to handle all the business for you. So instead of investing $500,000 into one property that you may make $1,500 a month in rental income, you can invest that $500,000 or whatever that amount would be. I'm just using that as an example, into 15 or 20 tax deed properties in somewhere like Florida that have a high rental income. So what makes Florida nice is the rental value is high and the property value is a little lower. And so depending on your market, it may be beneficial for you not to invest within your own state. I mean, we've talked to so many investors over the years that I'm terrified of investing outside my own area. Well, with the internet now, that makes it so much possible, and it may be financially beneficial for you to invest outside your own state.
We're not talking about buying sight unseen, because you do want to get some kind of evidence of that the property is still there. You don't need to know the exact value, but you want to make sure that that it is, the property is there and that it is worth investing in. And there are a couple of different ways you can have somebody from that area take a few pictures for you, which is what we did. But outside of that, you really don't have to be local anymore to do much. If you think about it, there's not really a whole lot that you actually would go down to your county building to do. Most of it can be done online. And if you own the property outright and you've only paid $10,000 for it, then you could quite easily work out a deal with owner financing to where you can basically become the bank. So you have the individual put $10,000 down, and maybe they have, they're buying it for whatever price you set, and they have a set mortgage. And what happens is you're still the deed holder on that property until they pay it off. So what happens if they default? You just take it back. You're never really in any risk of losing it, which is the same position that the banks are in. So you can really do this quite well and come out way ahead. Hiring out a property management company to handle everything for you, as far as keeping the place occupied and rented, bringing in money, that's a small price to pay, for that monthly check that you're going to receive for that. And basically, it's a plug and play operation. You turn it over to them, and you just sit back and collect the money. First step in getting started here is figuring out exactly where you want to go. This is one of the problems that people, constantly run into that we've talked with, is they like tax sales, but they haven't really defined exactly what it is that they're after, and that creates a lot of confusion related to the investment. So the question you really have to ask yourself here is, which one of these are you after? Which one is it that you want? Are you after property acquisition, or are you after a high interest rate return on a very safe investment? That decision will ultimately determine, what type of investment you go after.